Well, everyone, it's time for us to go ahead and compare the Samsung Galaxy S23 Plus against the iPhone 14 Plus and see which specific phone you should go and pick up. Now, funny enough, the 14 Plus, the iPhone 14 Plus, is not really selling too well. It's definitely not the best selling phone of all time. But these two phones are very interesting because they both hold that Plus moniker, which is very, very interesting to me. So if you want to pick up either one of these phones, the links will be down in the description. You can get that from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of both of these phones, the iPhone 14 Plus came out late last year, so just a few months ago. And on the front, it had a pretty big 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display. It was fairly higher resolution on that panel than the S23 Plus. It's still a 60Hz panel though, which is kind of annoying. It's not like the brightest panel of all time either, but it still gets fairly bright. You have the notch up top and everything like that. So definitely not like an ugly looking phone. It's just a bigger version of the iPhone 14. So there's really not like a crazy amount different that we already haven't seen before yet, but it's a good looking panel. I don't really have too much to complain about there. Now on the Samsung Galaxy S23 Plus, the one that just came out, you are getting a 6.6-inch dynamic AMOLED display. So it's 0.1 inches smaller, but it is 1080p, so a little bit lower resolution too, but it's a 120 Hz panel. It's a very good looking panel. The peak brightness is higher on the S23 Plus over the iPhone 14 Plus, but also it's a hole punch display. So that display on the S23 Plus, you're actually getting a more screen you can kind of see on the S23 Plus over the iPhone 14 Plus. I also do think the display on that phone is much better than the 14 Pluses, but it's still, a good display on the 14 Plus. It's just that the S23 Plus is just much better in my opinion. Now on the bottom, the S23 Plus has that USB-C port, which is fine. The 14 Plus has the Lightning port, which is kind of outdated now, but it's going to be switching to USB-C, I think, this year, which is great. Not this phone, but the 15 Plus. And on the back, we have glass backs on both, but they are a little bit different on both as well. So with the iPhone 14 Plus, we had that standard glass back. So it's, standard glass back, dual camera setup on the top left. The Galaxy S23 Plus, on the other hand, has that frosted glass back, much more similar to something like an iPhone 14 Pro or 14 Pro Max, and that is a very premium feeling back. I mentioned this many years now, but that is a very good feeling back. The same thing that was on the 11 Pro, 12 Pro, so on and so forth. That is a very premium feeling phone. With the 14 Plus, it's not that it feels cheap. I mean, it feels like every other phone that's kind of came out in the last few years, so there's not too much to complain about there, but we kind of already know what to expect from a device like that. So, some other key things, the 14 Plus has that MagSafe capability, which is great. The S23 Plus has reverse wireless charging, which is so awesome. Both these phones have IP certification, and that kind of covers it up on the outside. There's definitely a lot of overlap, but I would still kind of say that the flagship feeling one, and the one that's more of a flagship than the other one, is probably still the Samsung Galaxy S23 Plus. Now in that camera department, I kind of hit on them a little bit earlier, but on the iPhone 14 Plus, we're getting a dual camera setup. So we're getting a 12 megapixel wide angle lens and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. Whereas on the Samsung Galaxy S23 Plus, we're getting a triple camera setup. So a 50 megapixel wide angle lens, 10 megapixel telephoto lens, and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. Now on the front and on the back, we can do 4K at 60, which is great, but we do have that additional capability on the S23 Plus where we can actually do 8K video at 30 frames per second. That is actually a very crazy thing to keep in mind. With a lot of phones out there, we don't have 8K capability. So the fact that we have it on the S23 Plus is really cool. So now another big thing to keep in mind. Between both phones get to, and take very good photo and videos. If you're messing around with both these phones, you're going to have a pretty decent time with them, if I'm being honest. There's not like one device that's going to be like exceptionally way better than the other one in terms of quality. I've always found like the iPhone and the Samsung of that year typically hold up fairly well in that specific department, which has always been really good. But a big thing to keep in mind, at least in my opinion right now, is that with the phone like the Samsung Galaxy S23 Plus, you are getting a lot more features built into that type of device over the iPhone 14 Plus's camera. Taking a look at the camera UI, it's a pretty big difference. And that's something I've always seen time and time again between an iPhone and a Samsung. So I say that to say, if you are rocking something like a Samsung Galaxy S23 Plus, even an S22 Plus, even an S21 Plus, you're probably going to be getting more raw features in that camera over the iPhone 14 Plus in my opinion. Is it the biggest deal in the world? Not really, you kind of get used to it, but it is one of those things to keep in mind. So I still think the iPhone 14 Plus's camera is pretty good, but I think the S23 Plus camera, when it comes down to it, is probably the better one. Now moving on to the software longevity, I kind of do think even though the S23 Plus has been kind of hyped up throughout this video, I think the iPhone 14 Plus is probably going to be the one that's going to last the longest here. It's usually, when you look at a Samsung and an iPhone that came out the same year, even though Samsung's made some improvements in their software, it's definitely going to be siding with the iPhone of that year. If you take a look at the last couple examples, the Galaxy S10, the iPhone XS, the Galaxy S10, the iPhone 11 came out the same year. The iPhone 11 still supported, the Galaxy S10 is not really supported anymore. The Galaxy S20 and the iPhone 12, those came out the same year. The S20, I think, got its last version of software, whereas maybe the iPhone 12 is still going to be supported for many years now. So definitely when it comes down to these, the iPhone 14 Plus is still going to outlast the Galaxy S23 Plus, but the S23 Plus is still here. It's still going to be supported, and it's not really going anywhere anytime soon, at least for the next 3 or 4 years. So from that perspective, just kind of keep that in the back of your head as well. Now moving on to the performance side of things. Now with the iPhone 14 Plus, we had that Apple A15 Bionic chip inside of it with 6GB of RAM, where the Samsung Galaxy S23 Plus has that Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chipset inside of it with 8GB of RAM. So you're getting more RAM on something like the S23 Plus, but on Android and iOS, they are really well optimized nowadays, but iPhones don't need as much RAM on Androids, to be honest. Now with both these phones, they are very fast. They're going to be performing, at the highest level as of right now. With the 14 Plus, I felt like this phone had a very good performing chipset inside. The A15, which stemmed from the iPhone 13 the year before, was very good. I didn't really have too much to complain about there. It, was very, very good. I don't really know what to say anymore. I just feel like they should have put the A16 chip. I'm kind of done talking about the A15 Bionic, but it's a very good chipset for light applications, for heavy intensive applications. It's going to be very good. There's really not, it's more or less the same as the iPhone 13 that we've kind of talked about. With the Galaxy S23 Plus, it definitely is an improvement from the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, but even with this chipset, I still feel my phone getting kind of hot every once in a while. The 14 Plus manages its heat a little bit better. It doesn't overheat as much. With the S23 Plus, it still is up there for sure with performance, so it's still a very, very good performing phone, but I think it just needs a few more updates to get a little bit more optimized. And some battery tests and some battery comparisons I've done, it still is a little bit of a choppy kind of software experience that I'm getting, but I think it will be getting better throughout time. So I think as of right now, this phone is still very good, and I would probably say the S23 Plus is more powerful, but I think the iPhone 14 Plus is more of a smoother operating system with way less heating issues and anything like that. So that's kind of how I kind of see both these kind of comparing in that sense. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there as well. Now in the battery life department, you're getting pretty big battery differences between these two. With the iPhone 14 Plus, a 23 milliamp hour battery inside of that phone. The Galaxy S23 Plus, 4700 milliamp hour battery. So definitely a bigger size battery on the S23 Plus. I might still side with the iPhone 14 Plus getting better battery life. I've done so many battery comparisons between my Galaxy S23 and iPhone 14, and my iPhone 14 has been out competing my S23 Plus or my S23 for a little bit of time. So I assume the same thing would happen here, but I'll test it further and check in with you guys later. And to kind of sum up this video, what I'll definitely tell you is I definitely do think both these phones are good. You can't really go wrong with either one of these devices, but I definitely do think if I had to pick up one, I don't really know. They both are very close. I think the S23 Plus is more like a flagship, like I mentioned before. You're definitely getting more flagship type features on that phone over the iPhone 14 Plus. But I think the 14 Plus is still a little bit more stable. That might be the phone that more people will probably end up picking up just because it's more popular. But I like the S23 Plus a lot, and I do think it's actually a pretty good phone when it comes down to it. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.